Welcome, everybody. I'm Jill Jonathan, host of The World We Want. Today, my guest is Kat Calvin. She is a lawyer, an activist, an entrepreneur, founder and executive director of Spread the Vote and Project ID, and author of this incredible book that I usually keep on my shelf back here, but I had to hold it here for everybody to see. It's American Identity in Crisis. It's a must read, honestly. It just opened my eyes to things I had never even thought about. So, welcome. I'm really happy to have you here.
I'm so
Um,
happy to be here.
yeah, and you can see her book stuff behind her. It's
My
very pretty,
shameless
very pink.
self-promotion.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it makes like you think voting, like, okay, maybe that's kind of a dull subject. She makes it fun. She makes it interesting. She makes it relatable. So, that's what this conversation is really going to be about. But my first question for you is tell me about how your obsession with voter ID laws began. Like who gets that obsession? So how did that happen?
uh, so when I was in law school, and this will make me sound really old, but it's actually, I refuse that, although I am, but just this is how quickly things have changed in the last few decades. We still had a functioning Voting Rights Act. And so I studied voting rights, but it was very much like, here's what this is and how it happened and how it works, from a legal perspective. Yay. And then I went to South Africa and I studied voting there, and sort of saw what was happening, etc. But there weren't a lot of issues here. That's what we were taught. And then shortly after I graduated, the Supreme Court case Shelby County v. Holder uh, happened, and that is, for folks who don't know the name of the case, you probably remember it because it's when people who were not lawyers started realizing that RBG was a total badass because she wrote this insane dissent, and everyone was like, oh my God. And those of us who were lawyers were like, yeah, she's the best. But that was the Supreme Court case in which they took a huge chunk of the teeth out of the Voting Rights Act. They basically took out the enforcement mechanism that allowed the Department of Justice to ensure that a large variety of states and counties, jurisdictions, is not just sort of southern states. There are parts of California, there are parts of everywhere that were historically preventing people from voting based mostly on race and ethnicity. And the Department of Justice had multiple ways that they were able to protect and guard for that. And the Supreme Court took it out, and John Roberts, our Chief Justice, said, well, we have a black president now, so racism is over. We did it, you guys.
Good
Great
job.
job. Black people are voting, we're fine. And that is when RBG said, that's like saying, well, I'm not getting wet under my umbrella, so it must have stopped raining. As soon as you take the umbrella away, it's going to rain. And literally, since this was 2013, before this, there were like four-ish states that had voter ID laws, and they were really test cases. They were part of ALEC, which is something that you may or may not have heard of. It's the American Legislative Exchange Council, I think is the what that stands for. And basically, it is this Republican think tank that has existed for decades, where they figure out what laws they want passed. They test them out in different states. They get the formula right, and then they send those laws to Republican legislators all over the country, and they basically copy and paste. And I think John Oliver, I think it was him and not Jon Stewart, did a really, really good segment on this years ago, but you can just YouTube, John Oliver, ALEC, and you'll learn all about how this works. So they had been testing out voter ID laws. And so the state of Alabama, Shelby County, when they won, all of a sudden it meant that they could now pass these laws that they hadn't been able to pass before because the Department of Justice was able to reject it. And literally within 2 hours of the Supreme Court's decision coming down, Texas and Alabama started working on passing voter ID laws. It was something that the Democratic Party wasn't paying attention to, but Ari Berman, this wonderful journalist, and I were, he didn't know me yet, but we were like the only two people, and we watched it. And so that was 2013. So we had 4 states that had voter ID laws then. By the 2016 election, we had 21 states that had them, and we're now at about 36. So very quickly, this thing swept the country, and it's because Republicans are really, really strategic and organized, and they were able to make that happen. And so I'd been paying a lot of attention, and when the 2016 election happened, one of the things no one was talking about was the fact that it was really clear that people's lack of IDs had been a factor. So if you looked at, say, the margin of victory in Wisconsin, Hillary and Trump were, I think, like 14,000 votes apart or something. But there are over 200,000 registered voters in Wisconsin who don't have the ID that they needed to vote. And those numbers were replicated all over the country. And there were a ton of organizations that were working on stopping voter ID laws, either legislatively or judicially. But you can see from that growth in numbers, that was not happening. And so I was like, I guess I'll just get people IDs. And I thought it sounded a lot easier than it is. But then I started Spread the Vote, and we started working on helping people get IDs, and that got turned all over on its head. I'm sure we'll talk about it, but that's really where it came from, was seeing how the loss of that was really the first of the big chunks of the Voting Rights Act that were torn out. Now, it's basically in tatters. But seeing how it impacted us, and particularly seeing the ID thing, and particularly seeing that there was one solution to that. Two really, and now I've sort of worked on the other as well. But that wasn't. No one was really just like thinking like, oh well, let's just go get people IDs, or because it's hard. Everyone I spoke to at the ACLU in Britain, they were like, great, we need somebody to do this. Good luck. It's not going to be us, which I should have taken as a hint.
I'm glad you didn't, though. I mean, I feel like a lot of us, we get to a point where we're like, somebody should do something about that. And then we're like, oh, okay, I guess I'm going to be
It's
that
me.
person.
Yeah.
And that's where, I think it leads to a lot of us, maybe we take it for granted. A lot of us can take voting for granted. And so for me, I am lucky and privileged, and that's very easy for me. Like I have an ID, I can, go to the school that's really close where I vote. Like I just don't think about it too much.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious of like all this work that you've been doing for the past years. What is one or two things that you wish every American knew about voting that you don't think everybody does, and that would maybe make a difference and make people's eyes open up a little bit?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. I mean, one of the things we talk about a lot is micro barriers to voting, right? Like there are those of us for whom voting is pretty easy. Your
Mhm.
ballot shows up at your door, or you could just go to the elementary school or whatever, and it's very simple. And we have enough privilege of sort of education and experience and technology that we can look through our ballots, we can Google things. In California, our ballots are this big and they're really difficult and challenging, which I think is a big reason we have low voter turnout. But we do all have the privilege of the ballots showing up, and many of us can actually work our way through them. What we don't realize is that that is not the case for a lot of people. Again, just education and experience are huge. One of the things that's really hard for people is that they're looking at these ballots and they don't know what anyone does, right? None of us
Mhm.
really know. We're launching a very big tool next month called the Encyclopedia Politica. And basically what it will be is the first website that has in-depth and interactive explanations of what every single elected office in the country actually does.
Wow.
I'm really excited about it. We're launching with the first few states next month. I will have all 50 eventually, and then even more things. And we're doing interviews with candidates and case studies to show what they do. But we need that because you're supposed to be hiring these people, but you don't know what the
Mhm.
job is.
Right.
None of us
Yep.
know what the board of supervisors does, but they run your life, right? In California after the fires, people all of a sudden found out that the insurance commissioner is really important, but nobody knew that before. And so we're looking at these things, when we're trying to hire judges and we're trying to vote for ballot measures, and we don't understand what they are. And nobody on the planet, I've never been to a country where everybody knew what every elected official does. It's not a thing people know. And so
Right.
that in itself is difficult. But then you have all these other barriers, right? You have states that don't have mail in voting. And so then you have to be able to get time off to vote,
Mhm.
if they don't have early voting, or if they only have early voting on certain weekends. But if you work, first of all, every state has different laws about how many hours you get off to vote. But also, if you're working an hourly job with a bad boss and they don't let you go, sure, you could sue, but suing is actually really expensive and it's really
Right.
hard. And in the meantime, you've possibly lost your job, right? And then you add the fact that there are a lot of people who are caretakers and they have small children or see elderly people or people with disabilities they take care of. You know, we've had volunteers where we've like tag teamed and one person takes someone to vote and the other watches the kids in the car or whatever, because it's really hard to manage your actual responsibilities with going to the polls and standing in line. You may speak English as a second language, and you may know that there's going to be a ballot in your language at the polling place, because we do have laws that if a certain percentage of the population speaks a language, then there have to be ballots in those languages. Or, you know, places like Los Angeles County provide ballots in a ton of languages. But maybe you are one of few people who speak a different language and there aren't ballots, and maybe you don't know that they're going to be there. You know, there's so many different things that prevent people from voting. Maybe you're a person, you know, we're having this problem now, who has a disability, but some states make it very difficult to be able to qualify to vote from home, and so maybe you don't fit that qualification. And you know, we've had people in rural areas where we've had to like charter ADA, you know, accessible transportation to get them to the polls because they didn't have a way to get there and they didn't have the money to find the transportation. And you know, they're in a place where there's no Uber, right? Or where there is, but it's expensive. And so there are all of these different barriers, but if you have one, you probably have more, right? Like if
Yeah.
you are a person who is working a job where it's really hard to get off to work and so you don't have the time to work, you also are likely to have a language barrier or to have children you're caring for when you're not working or whatever, right? Like these things compound. And so that's why voter turnout is directly proportional to socioeconomic status in this country, right? 99% of the top 1% vote, and it goes down from there. And it's actually your income is a better indicator of your likeliness to go out and vote than any other factor: race, education, gender, anything. It's income. Because the more money you have, the easier it is to be able to pop off and vote, right? And so I think that people really, really need to understand that there are a ton of different things that stop people from voting and they build on each other. If you have one, you probably have more. And then the second part of that is those people want to vote, right? And we saw
Right.
this with COVID. When during COVID, every state had to enact all of these measures that voting rights activists have been begging for forever. And what did we see? We saw record turnout. We saw record turnout among young people. We saw record turnout among poor people. We saw record turnout among people of color. That's why in 2021, all of these states were like, oh my God, we can never do that again. Everybody voted. That's a problem, right? And so now we're seeing all of these measures to try to restrict voting, because it turns out everybody wants to vote, right? Students want to vote. That's why they don't put polling places on college campuses, because they'll turn out. And we saw that. And so this idea that, oh, these people are lazy or uninterested or whatever, they're not. They never have been. Hopefully everybody saw that in 2020 and understands everybody wants to vote. That's why they make it so hard to do so.
Wow. I mean, it's like once you start thinking about it, you're like, wait, hold on, that makes sense. And it's so easy for a lot of us to be like, go to the polls, vote, everybody vote. Like, it's just not that easy for everybody.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, like you said, that the turnout was so big in 2020 because there were like, it was easier to vote for a lot of people. So I'm curious of 2024, just like you personally, like being following all of this stuff, like what did you think about the voter turnout in 2024? And then were you surprised that Trump won in 2024?
No, Dems and Biden completely handed him that election, right? I mean, you know, I am so shocked and amazed that a half black, half Indian woman who got 107 days to run an election in the third most populated country in the world got 75 million votes. That's so friggin' incredible. Kamala Harris will always be my hero. She was absolutely magnificent. And that to me is proof of how extraordinary America is over anything else, because no other country can say that. But we had a corpse in the White House who insisted on lying to the American people about everything, including the economy, and refused to step down until he absolutely had to. And so he gave this woman 107 days to run against a man who has been running for 10 years. I wasn't surprised. And it's not even a reflection on America. It's a reflection on Dems and their failure. It takes 2 years and $2 billion to run for president in this country. It's a massive country. I've been to all 50 states, let me tell you. It's hard to do. It's a very, very big country, and we have a lot of issues and a lot of people to talk to. And when you have a party that has been rallied behind the same person, it doesn't matter what a monster he is, it doesn't matter that he's a senile, corrupt idiot with a bad to pay, like none of that matters, right? It's a consistent person and a consistent name. And then you have people a party that has made people feel alienated and lied to, whether that was their intention or not. There was no doubt that they had failed. Had Kamala had 2 years, she could have won, right? There are so many other things, but you can't give anybody 107 days. You could have put freaking, I don't know, Brad Pitt in there, and he only has 107 days. He's not going to win against someone who's had 10 years to run and build this cult of personality. And especially if you're coming from a party that's looking people in the eye and saying, like, I don't care if you can't afford groceries, the economy is great. Trust me. Just trust me. The economy is awesome. This is just you not budgeting well for your $52 eggs, right? Like, no, it wasn't a surprise. What surprised me and what I am so proud of and what makes me so incredibly hopeful is how many votes Kamala got, how much of the country stood behind her, even in that 107 days. Like, to me, that above almost anything else is what tells me that we are going to be just fine.
I mean, we all want to hear that, right? Like, you gotta hold on to that hope. So
Well,
I
look,
will
so
take it.
I never shut up about, oh, it's up here somewhere. I'm this incredible book called Why Civil Resistance Works. And it's these two brilliant women, and they did a study and they tried to figure out, how do countries beat authoritarianism? And what they found is you only need 3.5% of the population
Yeah.
to win, right? Well, we've got freaking more than that. First of all, we've got 75 million people, almost half of American voters who voted for Kamala. But then look at the No Kings protest, right? Like, look at all these things. We have well over half the country. Authoritarianism has no chance here, right? It just has no freaking shot. We're having some bad years. And, there are things that Trump does or is doing right now that are causing permanent damage, end of life, et cetera, and that we really need to focus on. There are also dumb friggin' things they're doing that I'm just like, whatever, like, bitch, we'll reverse that in 3 years. Like, you want to rename the USS Harvey Milk to the USS dumb shit? Fine. 3 years from now, we'll reverse it again. We did it your first administration. Like, half the stuff he's doing, they're just doing out of, sort of spite, or I call it right-wing gluttony, right? Like, they know this is their shot. So, like, we got to rename the Kennedy Center now because we only have 4 years to live our total racist right-wing dreams before we are squashed. And I'm like, fine, we'll rename it the Kennedy Center in 4 years. It's cost us nothing, right? Like, this is mostly stuff that absolutely doesn't matter. There's a lot of stuff that does. There's a lot of stuff they're breaking that we can rebuild better, and I'm kind of glad for it. But there's also a lot of stuff where I'm like, Trump, nobody cares. Fine, take everything off the website. You know what we could do? We could put information back on the website in 4 years.
We know how to do that.
We're gonna be fine. Like, we don't understand how typing works. Like, nobody cares, right? And so I think that for us to just remember, most of this stuff is reversible. Yeah, there's gonna be some permanent shit, that elections have consequences, but we're not descending into fascism. We're friggin' Americans. We fight and win. That's what we do. And we fight each other and win and come to compromise. That's how everybody has earned every single right in this country. That's who we are. And we've got well more than 3.5% of the population. We're fine. We're fine.
And so that leads me to, Trump wanting to end mail in voting,
Mm-hmm.
which is something that makes it way easier for people. So that makes me think that they're scared because they
Oh,
don't
yeah.
think they can win. So I'm curious, like, on your thoughts of that? Like, what do you think about them wanting to end mail in voting?
I mean, first of all, I think it's interesting. He's really pushing the boundaries of executive orders. But thanks to Mitch McConnell running a really incredible half century campaign to reshape the federal courts, which again, we've watched him do for 50 years and the Dems didn't do anything to stop it. He may get away with it. I don't know. We'll see. We'll sort of see what happens there. But I think there's no surprise. The thing that is so interesting to me about Republicans is that they believe their own lies, right? Like, so there in any study that you look at that sort of looks at who benefits from mail-in voting, it really isn't heavily biased on either
Mm-hmm.
side, because there are a lot of very rural people who depend on mail-in voting. There are a lot of seniors who depend on mail-in voting. Obviously, all of our active duty soldiers who are abroad vote by mail, right? Like, there are a lot of people who traditionally vote Republican who vote by mail. And so it's not nearly as skewed as people think it is towards Democrats, and Republicans should know that, right? But they believe the own lies that they've made up. And so if they end mail-in voting, they're not just ending it for us, they're ending it for Republicans as well. The difference is, not Democrats, but progressive organizations are really good at getting people out to vote. Like, we actually have the infrastructure and the mechanisms. We could be better. We have a lot of work to do, but like, we talk about and work on and have organizations that are focused on getting our people out to vote. They don't do that. So if they end in mail-in voting, fine. They end mail-in voting. We'll work harder to get people out to vote, right? One of the things that we run at Spread the Vote is vote by mail in jail. It's the only national voter incarcerated voter program, right? We work with jails all over the country. We had 90% turnout among our participants in 2024. We do a really good job of helping incarcerated citizens vote. We'll just help more of them, right? Like, there's no barrier they can put in front of us that we can't overcome if we just think about it and get funding and et cetera. But it's insane for Republicans because they don't have that infrastructure, and they're willing to cut off their nose to spite their face, right? He's not ending mail-in voting because it really impacts him. He's ending mail-in voting because it sounds good on the Joe Rogan podcast.
And then, okay, so another thing that, we are trying to fight back is going on to the new electoral map in Texas
Mm,
that's happening. And then you have California. So
yeah.
just talk to me a little bit about what you think about what's happening in Texas, and what do you think about California's response to that? Is that the kind of energy that we need?
Yeah, I mean, look, what's happening in Texas is no surprise, and I have so much respect for the Texas Dems who left and
Mhm.
tried to block it. They should still be gone. Like, put me in prison. I will lose weight and gain muscle and save money on bills, and you absolutely will not pass that bill. But fine, not everybody wants to go to prison. But yeah, I was talking to my friend the other day. Sent me Gavin's campaign website, and it's a bunch of just like Trump trolling. And I was like, good, we're done with this go high bullshit. We need to Dems will sacrifice this. Dems have sacrificed this country on the altar of propriety, right? Like, nobody clutches their pearls more than Dems. Nobody cares more about looking good at the dinner table versus actually fighting. And in California, we talk a lot about Gavin. When Gavin runs for president, I will dedicate my life to making sure he does not become president. But like, my life, everything I have will be dedicated, will be a one woman anti Gavin machine. But an Instagrammer or TikToker or something said it really well, because they said, Gavin is the guy. He's like the guy in your friend group with the popped collar, and he's kind of a jerk and nobody really likes him, and he always talks about how his dad is a lawyer, but when you get pulled over by the cops, he's the one you want talking to the cops. And that's sort of where we are with Gavin now. Gavin, I will die before that man steps into the White House, but right now he's the perfect guy to go against Trump, because he doesn't play this like, let's just be polite and go high BS. I'm like, yeah, it's no surprise that Texas was smart enough. It's very smart, it's very strategic, to add 5 new districts. What we need now is every Democratic state doing what, thank God, California decided to do, and that it wasn't just Gavin, but the whole assembly. They're total badasses right now. And they're like, all right, fine, we'll fight fire with fire. We need to start fighting fire with fire and stop fighting fire with holding hands.
Yeah. And so then, that leads me to something that you've been working on, that probably not a lot of people know about, is the IDs for an Inclusive Democracy Act. Can
Mhm.
you tell me what that is and what stage it's in right now?
The stage it's in is Congress is on fire. Yeah, so my main work, my life's work, is helping people in this country get government issued photo ID. There are 26 million American adults who don't have ID, DMV, regular IDs. And without those, you can't get jobs, you can't get housing, you can't get healthcare, you can't get veterans benefits, you can't get anything. You can't get beds in a lot of shelters and food from a lot of food banks. And so it prevents people from escaping poverty, from escaping homelessness, from being able to rebuild their lives and the lives of their families. It also costs us as a nation a lot of money. First of all, that is 11% of the adult population that is not working, which is both expensive on a benefits and homelessness and incarceration and everything side, but also it means that's taxes that we're not getting paid. It's it's involvement in the economy that's not happening, right? When when we talk about unemployment, every country has their own way of spinning unemployment numbers. So when we talk about employment, when we get the weekly unemployment numbers, what that actually is, it's not actually the people who are unemployed, it's just people who are claiming unemployment benefits for the very small window of time that they are able to do so. That's all. So they may tell us unemployment is 4%, 5%, 6%. Unemployment in this country is actually 24.5%. That's real unemployment. It's a quarter of adults in America. And now some of that is, stay at home moms, things like that. But a lot of it is people who want jobs and can't get them. And 11% of adults want jobs. One of the first things that happens when people get IDs from us is they say, great, where can I apply for a job, right? And they can't get them because they don't have IDs. And it's really, really hurting us as a nation. So my organization, we work on the ground, just one-to-one, helping people get IDs. We work helping agencies and organizations around the country learn how to help their folks get IDs. We're building ID networks and coalitions around the country. We do a lot of direct work, but I cannot get 26 million people IDs. And there will always be more because there are always more
Right.
people turning 18 every day. That doesn't stop. So we introduced a few years ago the IDs for an Inclusive Democracy Act into the House. And what that does is it creates a free and optional federal ID, like pretty much every other country has, that anybody can get, that you would get from the post office and libraries, not from the DMV. So big win there. That would be highly secure, but wouldn't have to require the mountains of documents that they require at the DMV that we don't actually need because, spoiler, the government has all of your information already. The DMV has all of your information already. The DMV scans your thumbprint wherever you go. They know who you are. All of that paperwork, it's just BS. It's just because we're trying for many reasons to purposefully make it as difficult as possible to get an ID. And it would be free. And it would work anywhere in the country. So one of the problems that we have is that when people move states, which often happens if you are unhoused, if you are low income and seeking a better opportunity, if you're a former foster kid, if you are a survivor of domestic violence who is fleeing, there are people who are constantly, who are moving often. When you go to a new state, in order to get a new ID, you have to have this stack of paperwork that people don't have, and it sort of hinders you the second you get there. And so with this federal ID, you wouldn't have to get a new state ID and have that stack of documents if you move, because it would be useful everywhere. And you could also use it to vote in federal elections, which for almost every state, Texas being Texas, already has a plan. But for almost every state, it's just too expensive for them to have separate state and federal elections. So anything you can use for a federal election, you can use for a state election. But basically, what it would do is it would get an ID into the hands of every American, particularly the 26 million adults who can't afford an ID and who are, hopefully are lucky enough to run into my organization and one of the very few organizations that helps people get IDs. So this is my life's goal. Is to pass this bill. Right now, we're reintroducing it every year, but we don't have a Congress that is passing anything. So we sort of are working on a back end strategy so that when we do get Trump out, when we do have a Congress that is working, and I think particularly when we are looking at how are we going to rebuild, because this is a bill that would massively improve our economy, and it would add millions of people to the workforce who want to be in the workforce and who will do pretty much any job. I think that this will be one of the perfect bills to help us rebuild. So we are, we're working in different ways to keep it in Congress, to build up support and stakeholders, et cetera, with the hope of being able to pass it as soon as we have a real Congress again.
Yeah. So you're ready. You're ready when it's time. And then
I am ready.
and I feel like this maybe answers, like, I might know the answer to this question, because if you had like a magic wand that you could just like wave across America and change something about voting in America or just in general, like how would you use that? What would you do? What's like the one thing that you would do with that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd pass my bill and make sure every
Yeah.
American has an ID. That is my life's goal. It's what I think about every second of the day. It is what I'm here to do. I care about this country and the people in it more than anything in the world, and I know that that is the thing that I can do that would vastly improve this country forever. So yeah, I'd make sure everyone had an ID.
Yeah. And then just a magic one, easy peasy. And then just to wrap this up, because I called this show The World We Want. And so I like to ask every guest to finish the sentence. I want a world. And then how would you finish that sentence?
All right, well, I'm not going to cop out and say I want a world in which everyone has an ID because I've already harped on that. What I will say is I want a world in which everyone has an equal opportunity to pursue happiness, right? In which we all start on an equal basis and have the ability to pursue our dreams no matter what. Some of those dreams will happen, some of them won't, right? But I want everyone to start on an equal playing ground and have the chance to try.
Yeah, I love that. That's everything. Thank you so much. And again, you can see the book behind her, but I will hold it up too because it's really that good. Like, if you want to learn more about the work that Kat is doing, get the book. And then also, where can everybody follow you on social media and all this stuff like that?
Sure. So I'm at Cat Calvin LA. I'm pretty much only on Instagram because I'm not on the Nazi platform anymore, and I can't. There's too many others. I can't decide. I was just like, forget it. But we're at Spread the Vote US on I think all the platforms except the Nazi platform. And if you go to my website, catcalvin.com, you can find links to my podcast and Substack and all of the orgs that I work with and things like that.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Bye.